Do not tell my Hightower that I've been spending time on the version 2 Sentinel. I want to be the one to tell it.
What's up, Senders? I am here in Brevard, North Carolina. If you are a mountain biker, that's probably a place that needs no introduction. I have had the privilege to be able to spend the last 3 days on this version 2 Sentinel. If you follow my channel at all, you know I'm a big Hightower fan, and so for context, you really want to check out my version 2 Hightower long-term relationship and review video. I've been aboard the Hightower for over a year now. It is a phenomenal bike, but if there is one bike that has given me any new bike envy at all in the last year, it is the version 2 Sentinel. There's a ton to like: super clean lines, very aggressive and burly look, a 63.6 degree head tube angle with the reduced offset fork geometry that Transition actually brought into the mainstream. And if you've watched any of my videos, including the Hightower review, that's one of the things that I think have really made the Hightower really pop, is the decision to run that reduced offset fork. That helps give it that really snappy feeling handling while still maintaining the capability that you can get with a slacker head tube angle. And so I've had several folks ask me, how does the Hightower compare to the new Sentinel? And I'm super stoked to be able to bring that comparison to you. And while they are very comparable bikes, there are some glaring differences. Again, the head tube angle of the version 2 Sentinel is almost 2 degrees slacker than on the Hightower. You're rocking 160 travel in the front, 150 in the rear, and the Hightower in the stock configuration is 150 in the front, 140 in the rear. I'm actually running the Cascade Components aftermarket lower link on the Hightower, which not only significantly increases the progressivity of the rear, but it actually brings the rear travel up to 150. I more recently upped the travel on the front to 160, so I am rocking 160, 150, just like the Sentinel has 160, 150. That has probably brought my head tube angle to somewhere in the 64.5 degree ballpark. And as I mentioned in my review video, one of the things that I really had to work for was to increase the progressivity of the rear. Now that Cascade Components aftermarket lower link definitely helped get me there, and yet that is over a $300 upgrade. And so if you're wanting more capability right out of the gate, I can already tell you the version 2 Sentinel is going to help get that done for you. And while both of these bikes have a reach number of 450 millimeters, the wheelbase is noticeably longer on the Sentinel because the head tube angle is 2 degrees slacker. And so if you're someone that's on the fence on sizing, that is worth noting. And yet for me, on a size medium on both bikes, they both feel fine. This one is notably longer, whereas the Hightower does feel a little bit snappier. You can definitely still notice that the Sentinel is a little bit slacker, even now that mine's slacked out a little bit more with the increased travel in the front. You can also see, just as far as aesthetics go, the lines on the Sentinel. They're straight down the top tube and continuous into the chainstays. The rear suspension design is obviously different, this trunnion mount rear shock. And the bearing points, it's worth noting the rebuild kit, if you get it from Transition, is almost $100. They do not give it to you for free. Whereas on the Santa Cruz bikes with this lower link design, you basically have bearings 1, 2, and then 3, 4 in the lower link. And Santa Cruz will send you those for free for life. And so that's definitely worth noting. Check out my video on how to replace the bearings in these because it's super easy. And again, you can't beat free. But while we're discussing the rear end, as you can see, it's super hard to be able to get to your rear shock, to be able to check your sag, and even for cleaning. It's just a really tight space on these Santa Cruz lower link bikes. Whereas look at how nice and open everything is on this version 2 Sentinel. It's just very enviable to be able to get to your rear shock, make adjustments. Some people have complained, you know, I washed this bike last night and you can still see the water. And as far as just cleaning goes though, I mean, just getting to everything on the rear of this bike is definitely a little bit easier. As far as droppers go, both of these mediums will fit a 180 post, no problem, but they will not fit a 210 post. The insertion on there pretty much is identical. The headset is integrated on the Santa Cruz bikes, whereas it is not on the Sentinel. So you can actually run an angled headset, and you know, maybe most would argue that you're never going to do that because it's so slack anyway. Some people may actually want to make it less slack if they want to shorten the wheelbase slightly. Both bikes have a threaded bottom bracket. The chainstays on the version 2 Sentinel, 440 millimeters, whereas on the Hightower in the stock configuration, it's 435, and yet with the Cascade link, I think it's supposed to add 5 millimeters.
As you can see here, the actual rear brake hose is not internally routed, but on the Hightower, both cables are internally routed. And the dropper cable is also internally routed on the Sentinel as it is on the Hightower. The Hightower, though, as far as the dropper cable routing, there's actually a tube that runs in the frame that basically helps put it where it needs to be, coming up into the seat tube. Whereas I've heard from mechanics that there's not that tube in the transition frame, and so you're kind of on your own as far as making this bend with the internal routing. They also say, though, that that saves weight because there's not the extra tubing in the transition frame.
So I'll go ahead and make some conclusions regarding the comparison between the version 2 Hightower and the version 2 Sentinel. I feel like most Hightower owners are Hightower owners because they're looking for a really efficient bike that is still super capable, and it is just that. That's probably why you would consider a Hightower over, say, a Mega Tower. And if you compare the Hightower with the version 2 Sentinel, it is a noticeably more efficient bike. So with that being said, the version 2 Sentinel is a surprisingly efficient climber. I do personally perceive a little bit more pedal bob. I've actually got it set up with about 28% sag, but I feel like with the lower link VPP design, it's just naturally more efficient with out of the saddle sprinting and with climbing. But this is much more efficient than what I went in assuming that it would be. Now, as far as the handling of this bike, the snappiness, the cornering, I actually really like the way the version 2 Sentinel feels. I really thought that it would be more sluggish because of that extended wheelbase and that slacker head tube angle, but to my surprise, it's still very balanced. That reduced offset fork just really keeps things centered and balanced. It also has a little bit longer chainstay, but obviously the Hightower is also super snappy in the corners, probably a little bit more so because it is a shorter wheelbase. But I'm 5'9", almost 5'10", and so I'm on the high end of who should be running a medium in the Hightower, but I sit squarely in the height range that Transition recommends for a medium. And so if you're like me and you're sort of in between sizes, you might want to give a nod to the version 2 Sentinel. Now, as far as playfulness, manualing, I do find the version 2 Sentinel a little bit harder to manual. It can certainly be done. I don't find it quite as easy to manual as the Hightower. Part of that could be the fact that this is spec'd with a 40 mil stem, whereas I'm pretty much running no stem on my Hightower. Bunny hopping, I feel like I can bunny hop pretty well on the Sentinel, just like I can on the Hightower. And jumping, it's a super natural jumper. I mean, if you're just gonna be rolling into some jump lines, the Sentinel is gonna take care of you just like the Hightower has taken care of me. They're both really fun jumpers. The Sentinel does have just a little bit more of a subdued feeling. It's a little bit more fun when you've got it at speed, whereas the Hightower is a little bit more fun at slower speeds. But don't let me fool you, this is still a really poppy and playful bike. I personally felt like it feels just a little bit more subdued, which lends itself to increased downhill capability. For me personally, right out of the box, I have found the Sentinel to be a more capable downhill descender, more capable at taking big hits than the Hightower was out of the box. It has been almost frustrating for me at times of what all I've had to do to get the capability out of the Hightower that I feel like you've got right out of the box with the Sentinel. This Sentinel is a really good bike to have as an all-around trail bike that leans itself more towards the downhill. I would feel completely comfortable going out on 15-mile rides on this that has just as much climbing as it does descending. It does everything really, really well. I just think if you're comparing these two bikes, it definitely lends itself to a little bit more capability, which I personally like. Again, don't blast me in the comments for saying that this is not an efficient bike or that it does not climb well or that it's not a poppy and playful bike. It's just when you're comparing the two bikes, it's a little bit less than the Hightower, and yet this thing is definitely a shredder anytime the trail turns down or chunky. But if you're somebody that just loves to hammer, wants to charge hard all the time, you might give the version 2 Sentinel a little bit more of a look because that capability is noticeable on the version 2 Sentinel. And this could easily turn into a Mega Tower versus Hightower versus Sentinel. I definitely think the Mega Tower and the Sentinel would probably actually be a little bit more of a fair comparison. So which is it, version 2 Hightower or version 2 Sentinel? I'm gonna let you decide. They are both super phenomenal bikes. I have an all-out blast when I'm on my Hightower. I've had a very fun time riding this version 2 Sentinel. Honestly, I would probably pick the one that you like the look of the best. Combined with, if you're someone that's looking for all-out capability, you're a really hard charger, you're riding some really rough terrain, I would probably edge toward the Sentinel. If you're someone that's doing a ton of regular trail riding, you need the utmost in efficiency, you might look at the version 2 Hightower. If you're like me and are on the taller end of between the two sizes on the Hightower, I actually find the fit of the Sentinel at my height to be a little bit more natural and comfortable. For their travel numbers, they're both relatively efficient bikes with a slight nod toward the Hightower. For their travel numbers, they're both really capable bikes with a slight nod to the Sentinel. I really hope you found this review and comparison helpful. Please consider subscribing to the channel, as I'm always bringing you more content. Also, consider following me on Instagram at Dr_J_MTB. Trying to bring some regular content to the gram as well. As always, thanks for watching.